This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global markets are up today after U.S. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's soothing comments comforted investors. Emerging market shares were on course to record their best day in 3 weeks on hopes that global borrowing costs will remain lower for longer. Now, MSCI's benchmark emerging market stock index gained 1.4% on the day, and that's after falling 5% from its all-time high over the past week. South Africa's JSE was up with a strong showing from the resource and gold indices today. They were up over 5% and over 5% and over 2.5% respectively. Locally, investors are digesting Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's Wednesday budget speech. Now, also coming up on today's show, China marks eradication of extreme poverty within its borders. Egypt's exports to African nations to double over the next 4 years. And how about a robot for a concierge? Well, a hotel in South Africa bets on human-like machines as it employs measures to combat the coronavirus. Well, let's start off today's show with China. The country is marking success in eradicating extreme poverty. Earlier on Thursday, the government held a national conference in Beijing marking China's achievements. Amongst other things, 770 million people have been lifted out of destitution in just over 40 years. Our reporter Su Yuting has the details.
Expressing thanks to all the role models who contributed to China's victory against extreme poverty. That was the message from President Xi Jinping, who presented awards and certificates to national honorary recipients in Beijing on Thursday. Those honored come from diverse backgrounds, from a 98-year-old researcher to young grassroots-level officials. President Xi Jinping hailed the country's achievements in eradicating extreme poverty, calling it a miracle of history. He said China's accomplishments also set a pioneering example for the international community.
We have created a China model for poverty reduction, and we've made great contributions to global poverty reduction. Based on the current poverty standard, 770 million rural people have been lifted out of poverty in China since reform and opening up began. And according to the international poverty line set by the World Bank, China accounted for 70% of the world's total, which were lifted out of poverty. China achieved the poverty reduction goal set by the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 10 years ahead of the deadline.
President Xi Jinping first raised the concept of targeted poverty alleviation in 2013. Over the past 8 years, nearly 100 million impoverished rural residents living below the current poverty line have managed to escape extreme poverty. More than 800 counties have been removed from the poverty list. Despite the challenges of COVID-19 through 2020, China also succeeded in lifting the remaining 52 counties out of poverty. These were mostly in remote areas in southwestern and western China. For China, eradicating extreme poverty has been a major success, but the battle isn't over yet. President Xi Jinping has said, and I quote, "Being lifted out of poverty is not an end in itself, but a starting point for a new life." Su Yuting, CGTN, reporting from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
Well, CGTN's Yu Yang now tells us how China achieved its goals in 2020 and what challenges still lie ahead.
100 million rural residents have escaped extreme hardship in China, with more than 830 poverty-stricken counties shaken off poverty by the end of 2020.
Over the past 40-plus years of reform and opening up, More than 700 million people in China have been lifted out of poverty, contributing to more than 70% of the global reduction in poverty. That's a really great achievement.
To reach the goal, a variety of policies have been issued by both the central and local governments. From 2016 to 2020, the central government increased the funds to eradicate poverty by an additional 20 billion yuan every year. That's an extra $3 billion annually. In 2020 alone, total funds to eradicate poverty reached nearly 150 billion yuan. That's more than $22 billion. Since late 2012, China has sent more than 3 million cadres to impoverished villages to fight poverty on the front lines.
I've been to Shanxi Province, Mizhi County several times. The county's party secretary comes from PetroChina. He shared his resources experience about the construction of the county. For example, the county's infrastructure has developed very well. They've also set up e-commerce platform to sell their agricultural products.
The country has also put forward many targeted measures to eradicate poverty. These include developing local industries, setting up microfinance programs, as well as establishing online platforms to sell agricultural products.
China has also put forward a relocation program helping to move people living in remote areas to the regions which are more suitable to live. 10 million of China's residents have participated in it. Local governments are helping them to find jobs in and around resettlement sites. This program provides people more opportunities to expand their view and enjoy new lives.
In recent years, China has also shared its experiences in poverty eradication with other countries and international organizations, including Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, and the United Nations.
Economic opportunities, diversification, new drivers of growth, plus targeted programs is what makes the Chinese program so successful.
China has been extremely good in understanding who the poor were and why they were poor. And understanding that, they were able to develop tailored measures that could address poverty.
For the future, one notable sign that China State Council's leading group office of poverty alleviation and development will be replaced by a new organization called the State Bureau of Rural Development. And this may indicate that the country's next focus could be the revitalization of rural areas. Yu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's now delve deeper into China's economic strategy with Johnson Chukwu. He is the CEO at investment firm Kauri Asset Management. Great to have you with us today, Mr. Chukwu. Now, eliminating poverty in a country of about 1.4 billion people, that's quite an ambitious endeavor. When you examine the strategy China used to achieve this poverty eradication, what are some of the key elements that stand out for you?
Thank you for having me. The two key elements that stand out are, one, the Chinese broad-based economic growth. You saw the Chinese economy grow very fast in the last 30 to 40 years. And that actually helped in lifting a lot of people out of poverty. The second component of this poverty eradication is direct intervention in the lives and the communities where you have the extremely poor, where the government had to improve on the quality of education, improve on infrastructural supply, did direct social support for the extremely poor, relocated some of them to better environment, intervene in housing infrastructure in those areas. So there are two broad-based approaches to it. One is the broad-based economic growth rate. The Chinese economy was opened up, invited a lot of foreign investment, was export-oriented, created a lot of jobs, and was growing very fast that trickled down across the country. And that was why China achieved what it took the Western countries more than 150 years to, that China achieved it in less than 50 years.
Well, to what extent do you think China's reform and opening up policy played a role in helping the country to end poverty in the nation?
I think that's one of the most critical factors that contributed to ending poverty in China. If you consider the fact that the Chinese population, 1.8 billion, as not too far as 1978, 97% of Chinese were living in abject or extreme poverty. By 40 years time, which was 2018, they had reduced that number to just barely 1.6, 1.7% of the population before they eventually eliminated poverty in the country. The key factor is that the economy was growing at an average of more than 10% for the first 30 years of its reform transformation years. And that automatically created a lot of jobs. China was also very strong in terms of its economic planning, which impacted on the infrastructure supply, impacted on quality of education, and China was able to adopt technology quickly. So the effect of this was that there was a pervasive economic growth rate that had created opportunities for employment among those who had the competencies. And China was also attuned its educational system to be in tandem with the job demands of its economy, which led to the reduction of unemployment to just about 4% in China. So these are factors that were very critical to China lifting more than 850 million people out of poverty between the years of 1981 and 2013.
Now, like every nation globally, we know the COVID-19 pandemic did pose a huge challenge to China's efforts to lift people out of poverty. What are your thoughts on the country's strategy in providing economic support at the peak of that crisis?
You know, interestingly, globally, China has proven to be one of the best countries that successfully navigated through the COVID-19 crisis. If you consider the fact that the Chinese government, one, had a very strong hold on the environment where COVID first manifested. It had a very strong lockdown, and it was also one of the few countries that immediately intervened in the economy to support a consumption within the economy. And that's one of the, and as you know, Chinese economy is also one of the few countries in the world that didn't go into recession in 2020. As a result of COVID. As we speak today, Chinese economy is really growing faster than most other countries in the world, probably because of the level of intervention of the government in managing the COVID-19 health crisis.
Now, of course, it has been said or argued that Africa can stand to learn a few things from China. What are your thoughts on what other nations, especially here on the continent, can learn from China's strategy?
I think the first thing the African leaders must learn is strong political will is critical in driving the continent out of poverty. Two is that the Chinese use agriculture, which is still basically the major industrial sector of the African economies, or the leading sector in African economies. By intervening in agriculture, improving the quality of agricultural products, intervening in the seedling and the quality of the nature of agricultural activities. Then the other factor we have to recognize is that direct intervention in the lives of the rural dwellers, provision of infrastructure, improving on their competence level through skills acquisition, supporting those rural dwellers in forms of housing facilities, in forms of social security support are critical, which African economies, African leadership can easily copy and replicate. Because there's actually nothing that China did that cannot be replicated elsewhere in the world. What matters is that you have the political will to drive those processes, and do you have the resources? In a lot of instances, not so much of resources, it's having the appropriate policy and intervening at the highest level of governance.
Certainly a deeper discussion. Well, many thanks, Mr. Chukwu, for joining us today. That, of course, is Johnson Chukwu. He is the CEO at investment firm Kauri Asset Management. Well, let's head back to the continent now. A group of young Ethiopians have completed training to become train drivers. They attended a program provided by China as part of the country's initiative to help other nations reduce poverty. Now, having passed all the tests set by the program at their training camp in central China's Zhengzhou city, the Ethiopian trainees are now junior train drivers who are working on the Addis Ababa-Djibouti railway. The railway connects landlocked Ethiopia to the sea, linking Ethiopia's capital with Djibouti and its port of Dorele.
They need to finish the courses which take a Chinese student 2 to 3 years to finish within 8 months.
I believe my experience in China will hopefully change my life and my family's life too. Finally, I want to say thank you, China.
And here's a look at some of our corporate headlines today. French state-controlled power firm EDF has struck deals to buy stakes in Econet Energy Kenya and Bbox Kenya as it looks to boost its presence in Africa and in renewable energy. Now, EDF said it had bought a 50% stake in solar energy firm Econet Energy Kenya and a 23% stake in off-grid energy company Bbox Kenya. The financial terms were not disclosed. Meanwhile, Facebook has pledged to invest at least $1 billion to support journalism over the next 3 years. This is as the social media giant defends its handling of a dispute with Australia over payments to media organizations. Nick Clegg, Facebook's head of global affairs, said in a statement that the company is willing to support news media while reiterating its concerns over mandated payments. Meanwhile, AB InBev has forecast meaningfully better 2021 earnings after sales in Brazil and Mexico and a large tax credit inflated profits at the end of 2020. The world's largest brewer and maker of Budweiser, Stella Artois and Corona lagers predicts increased drinking and higher prices as countries emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, Aston Martin expects to almost double sales and move back towards profitability this year after sinking deeper into the red in 2020. The luxury car maker was hit by the coronavirus pandemic, changed its boss, and was forced to raise cash last year. Now, the British company's shares jumped 9% in early Thursday trading after it kept a forecast of around 6,000 sales to dealers this year as new management turns around its performance. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still to come on the show. Egypt to double exports to African nations over the next 4 years. An e-commerce giant Jumia in progress towards profitability.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest minds in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, the Rockefeller Foundation has announced a $35 million grant disbursement to 10 African nations. This is to ensure more equitable access to COVID-19 testing and vaccines, as well as to combat an escalating food crisis and to scale up access to renewable energy. Now, the announcement comes after another commitment of $1 billion by the foundation. Well, joining us to discuss this further is the Foundation's Managing Director for Africa, Mr. William Asiko. Great to have you with us today, Mr. Asiko. Now, of course, looking at that disbursement, about $12 million will go towards Africa's CDC's effort to, of course, accelerate testing and tracing on the continent. Where do you plan to channel the rest of that funding?
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me here. So this is a commitment by the Rockefeller Foundation that aims to end the pandemic for everyone, not just those in wealthier countries, but for everyone, those communities that are disadvantaged and those communities that may not necessarily be getting the support that they need. And so the $12 million, as you've mentioned, is going towards the Africa CDC to support testing and tracing. And the balance of that is going to a myriad of projects that will support this work with the Africa CDC around data. So, for example, data is going to be really important in this fight as we go towards vaccine rollout. For example, testing and tracing, data becomes very important. So we have a lot of grantees that we're giving these grants to establish data systems that can collect data about who has been contacted, who's been named, who's been in contact with somebody who's tested positive, and then later on when the vaccine becomes available, who's been vaccinated, who is ready for the second dose, and so on and so forth. So all the $12 million and the balance of the 35 are all working together towards this effort.
Well, as you know, Africa has lagged seriously behind in terms of acquiring vaccines. I'm curious to know, how is the foundation participating in the efforts to acquire enough doses of the vaccine for Africa?
So as you know, vaccines are short all over the world. And I think many countries have made commitments to vaccinate their populations. And those that are manufacturing the vaccines have an advantage over the others. Africa is not doing badly. I know through the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Force of the African Union, they have already acquired 270 million doses for Africans through the COVAX facility. And so, yes, of course, the vaccines are going to be a challenge, and they will come in batches. But countries are working. There are 4 different sources of vaccines for most African countries. There is the COVAX facility, through which the African Union has acquired its 270 million doses. National governments are acquiring vaccines on their own. And then there are countries that are donating excess vaccines that they have, as well as other countries that have gone quite far in vaccinating their people, like countries like China are also donating vaccines to African countries. So even though it will be a challenge to have vaccines, I think that in the long run, Africa will get sufficient doses to get to herd immunity.
Well, let's go back to where these funds are going to be challenged. We know it is all part of a $1 billion commitment by the foundation over the next 3 years, where you're basically going to be facilitating green recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So give us a sense of what are the areas of focus or sectors are you looking at this year besides these COVID-19 interventions?
Thank you. So the $1 billion commitment was made just about 100 days ago. And so this is very early days in terms of, deploying those resources. And we're looking at it in a way that, many societies are thinking about when we go back to pre-COVID days. And if you think about it, in many societies, many communities, it's going to be impossible to go back to pre-COVID days. Many societies were struggling before COVID, and COVID will have only exacerbated the problems and challenges that they have. And so it'll be very difficult for them, especially the most vulnerable communities, to go back to pre-COVID days. And so what our commitment aims to do is to help a clean, green recovery, help those communities recover from the effects of the pandemic. So first is to end the pandemic for everyone through our health interventions, testing, tracing, and vaccines when they become available, with data innovations to support that work. And then on the other side is providing opportunities, economic opportunities for communities to help them recover from the pandemic. And what this means is your previous story was about China, lifting 100 million people out of poverty and celebrating that milestone. What a significant milestone it was. And if you think about how they did that, one of the key things that they had to overcome was to ensure that they ended energy poverty in the rural areas and hard to reach areas and those communities that are not on the national grid. So part of this commitment is going to an effort that we call ending energy poverty, because you are not going to end poverty without first ensuring that your communities have energy. Energy provides opportunities for jobs. It provides opportunities for SMEs to add value to agricultural produce. It provides opportunities for farmers to irrigate their land, and so on. And so ending energy poverty is a key goal of this commitment. And then finally, another key goal of this commitment is bringing together this nexus between agriculture and energy. One of the things that has plagued African agriculture is, over the years, has been low productivity. Although there have been great improvements in the last 20 years, we are still lagging behind as a continent in terms of productivity and ensuring that we are getting the maximum out of the land that we can get. And one of the reasons is a big reliance on rain-fed agriculture. So the idea that energy could provide opportunities for irrigation is potentially something huge, a game changer that could bring transformation on the continent's agricultural sector. And then secondly, agro-processing. Energy is a key requisite for agro-processing and adding value to agricultural produce.
Right. Well, we do have to leave it there, but thank you so much for that interesting discussion, Mr. Siko. Of course, he's the MD of the Rockefeller Foundation's Africa arm. Well, let's move on now to Egypt. The country's exports to African nations are projected to double over the next 4 years, and that's once the Continental Free Trade Agreement stages are fully rolled out. Now, Egypt is estimated to make annual exports to Africa worth $4.7 billion and stands to benefit from increased intra-continental trade. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Egypt has been one of the leading advocates of the African Continental Free Trade Area and was one of the first countries to ratify the treaty back in April 2019. The North African country's exports to the rest of Africa pre-COVID-19 has reached $4.7 billion, but it only accounts for about 15% of Egypt's total exports.
Egypt is known as a good ceramic, tiles and granite manufacturer, as well as a producer of iron, steel and electrical appliances. Egypt exports these products to African countries and is planning to export natural gas and renewable energy components like solar energy tiles. The country also exports electricity to Libya and Sudan. Egypt is expanding its feeder industries, such as for vehicles, and exporting them to African countries due to its skilled low-cost labor.
Authorities in Egypt say the opportunities offered by the African Free Trade Area could catapult the North African country's exports in the continent to double in 4 years, once all stages of the treaty are rolled out. Experts, however, say there are still several challenges that lie ahead before intra-African trade can flourish.
There are several challenges that is really on different levels. If we're talking about the infrastructure, which is a very important, and it's very important because we need roads, we need networks, we need maritime, we need aviation, so we need technological infrastructure with reference to our IT communications. We need political engagement, public-private sector partnerships, and most always is information, because as we all know that we have lack of missing information across the whole over the private sector. How do we achieve the business linkages? How to make sure of an inventory of their existing resources on the continent?
Nevertheless, the rollout of the ACFTA pact is expected to have a positive impact on Egypt's economy.
The AFTA is 100% beneficial for Egyptians, especially with our strategic location for trade on the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Suez Canal, as well as a strong historic ties with big economics in Africa like Nigeria, South Africa, Sudan, Libya, and Cameroon. This will push bilateral trade within Africa to a higher level and helps Egypt to become a gateway to export African products to places like China, Europe, and the US. This trade boom will increase production and create employment opportunities for all Africans. That's about 2 million jobs in the next 10 years.
Data from the World Bank forecasts total revenues in the continent to reach $450 billion following the rollout of the pact, while Africa's exports are expected to grow to $560 billion annually. In addition, income levels are expected to double to 20%, while those below $5 income will see a significant rise in their revenue. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, but still to come on the show. Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine next in line for emergency rollout. And a hospital in China develops a virtual reality system for hospital visits.
No war, no one again he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
The activity, thank you very much for your time now. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Let's now take a look at other headlines this hour. In Nigeria, gunmen have killed 36 people in 2 separate attacks in Kaduna and Katsina states. Now, the violence comes just one day after suspected Boko Haram militants fired rocket-propelled grenades on residential areas in the country's north. At least 10 people were killed in the Tuesday attack in the Borno state capital of Maiduguri. And Côte d'Ivoire is set to become the second African nation after Ghana to receive vaccines from the global COVAX scheme. The shipment is part of an initial tranche of deliveries bound for several low and middle income nations. Now, the AstraZeneca vaccines destined for Côte d'Ivoire are from the Serum Institute of India, and they are expected to arrive in the country on Friday. Meanwhile, Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo will be the first to be inoculated against COVID-19 in his country. Presidential advisor on health, Anthony Nsiaya Asare, said this will be done ahead of the mass vaccination on March 2nd to assure Ghanaians it is safe. And Uganda says the United States cannot lecture it on democracy. The response comes after a U.S. State Department spokesperson said the Biden administration was considering holding some individuals accountable for their involvement in alleged human rights violations during Uganda's recent elections. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Now, Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine could be next in line for emergency use rollout. According to documents published by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the one-shot COVID-19 vaccine appeared safe and effective in trials. Now, the FDA's panel of independent experts meets on Friday to decide whether to approve the one-shot vaccine. Of course, J&J's vaccine has been said to be 66% effective in preventing COVID-19 against multiple variants in a global trial involving nearly 44,000 people. Its effectiveness varied from 72% in the United States to 66% in Latin America and 57% in South Africa, where a variant has spread.
I think this news from the Food and Drug Administration is very encouraging. We know that we need to get more people vaccinated, especially when there's a variant around. Because remember, viruses can't mutate if they can't survive. So the more people we get vaccinated, the better. And to have another vaccine available, and I expect it'll be authorized this weekend, is really going to help in terms of getting as many people vaccinated in as short as time as possible. So it's very good news.
Meanwhile, a real-world test of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine in more than 500,000 people confirms that it is very effective at preventing serious illness or death, even after one dose. Now, Wednesday's published results from a mass vaccination campaign in Israel gave strong reassurance that the benefits seen in smaller, limited testing persisted when the vaccine was used much more widely in a general population with various ages and health conditions. Now, the vaccine was 92% effective at preventing severe disease after 2 shots and 62% effective after 1. Its estimated effectiveness for preventing death is at 72% 2 to 3 weeks after the first shot. The rate may improve as immunity builds over time, and it seemed as effective in people over 70 as in younger people. And still on vaccines, U.S. biotech firm Moderna has said that doses of its new COVID-19 vaccine candidate aimed at the South African variant have been shipped to the U.S. National Institute of Health for testing. Mayo Clinic is hoping to begin the clinical study of the variant booster with the support of the NIH's continued collaboration to combat the pandemic. Now, Vanderbilt University confirmed the positive outlook of the vaccine, with 1 dose recording high effectiveness in prevention of death. And U.S. President Joe Biden wants to raise the federal minimum wage. It hasn't gone up since 2009, but a hike has been proposed in Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package. And the proposed rate is more than double the current amount, raising some concerns. Here's CGTN's Karina Huber reporting.
A majority of workers in the United States, many who work in the services industry, are paid by the hour. In 2017, roughly 1.8 million of them were earning wages at or below the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. It's been stuck at that rate for 12 years, while the cost of living has been rising. Many cities and states have increased the minimum wage on their own, but others, mainly southern states, have not. U.S. President Joe Biden wants to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025.
No one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. That's what it means. If you work for less than $15 an hour and work 40 hours a week, you're living in poverty.
Biden and other Democrats are hoping to include a minimum wage hike in the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package being negotiated in Congress. But some lawmakers, both Republican and Democrat, are opposed, saying higher wages will lead to job cuts.
According to a report by the Independent Congressional Budget Office, raising the minimum wage would have both positive and negative outcomes. On the positive, it would lift roughly 900,000 Americans out of poverty. On the negative, it would lead to roughly 1.4 million job losses.
The CBO says the majority of the job losses would be among younger, less educated Americans. The International Monetary Fund supports a wage increase to fight income inequality in the U.S., but says a jump from $7 to $15 is substantial and should be implemented slowly.
I think there is an argument to phase this in slowly to ensure that you kind of see what the effects are going to be of increasing this minimum wage in terms of effect on employment and in terms of effect on wages and jobs and so on.
Liberal-leaning Senator Bernie Sanders said he feels confident the wage hike will remain in the coronavirus relief bill.
We've got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour. That's what the American people want, and that's what I intend to do.
Biden has conceded the wage hike may not get enough support in Congress to make it into the coronavirus bill and has vowed to pursue an increase through a separate piece of legislation. But that could prove even more challenging, as it would need 60 votes in the U.S. Senate to pass, a big hurdle with the Senate divided 50-50 on partisan lines. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Well, let's shift focus now. After years of losses, African e-commerce giant saw gross profit increase by 12.5%. It also saw its user base grow by 12% in 2020 with 6.8 million customers, and that's from 6.1 million in 2019. That means the company added about 700,000 new customers in 2020 compared to the 2 million customers which it acquired the year before. Now, the company's gross merchandise value, which is the total worth of goods sold over a period of time, grew about 23% in the fourth quarter of 2020. Its gross profit reached about $34.1 million in 2020, representing a year-over-year gain of about 12%, as we mentioned. Well, let's now get the story behind those numbers. We're joined by Juliet Anama. She's the chairwoman at Jumia, Nigeria. Great to have you with us on the show today, Madam Anama. Now, while 2020 was pretty much a challenging year due to COVID-19 disruptions, taking a look at your Q4 numbers, you reported record gross profits, but we also saw that annual active consumers increased at a slower pace compared to 2019. We also saw that order numbers are dropping. Give us some insight into what happened there, and of course the extent to which this pandemic impacted Jumia's business model.
Thank you for having me on the show. I think the results that we presented both at Q4 and our full year 2020 is really the outcome of very deliberate decisions that we've taken. So one example being a deliberate decision to reduce the promotional intensity on certain types of products that have very low consumer lifetime value. So for example, digital services, particularly airtime recharge, that we used to offer quite a lot of incentives on those. So from towards Q4 2020, we sort of refocused and reduced the promotional intensity on those kinds of products. So you see that playing out there in terms of order volume. So while Q4 2019 versus Q4 2020, you saw that reduction in order volume by 3%, but on a full year basis, it's actually up by 5.1%. The second thing that is also playing out, again, strategic decisions we've taken is around rebalancing our product mix. So we're rebalancing, having more emphasis on everyday type of products that consumers buy frequently and which by nature have a much higher consumer lifetime value. So that plays out in terms of lower average order value, and that reflects in the GMV. But these kinds of products also have a better unit economics for us, which is very, very important.
Right.
And one of the things you mentioned there, if I might just go there, is also when you look at our cost structure. So we really used the year 2020, the COVID period and all that, to double down on financial discipline. So when you look at our full cost base, when you look at our fulfillment costs, you look at our sales and advertising costs, and also look at our general administrative costs, excluding share-based compensation, you see that those have dropped 18%, 34%, 36% respectively. And overall, our adjusted EBITDA is down by 47% year on year.
Well, let's look closer at the outlook for the business. We know 2020 was a year where we saw a lot of online businesses such as Jumia flourishing. Of course, African e-commerce startups are also attracting more funding now, particularly in one of your biggest markets, Nigeria. As you face a new set of competition in e-commerce and of course the logistics market, what are your plans to cement your foothold as the leading player in that key market?
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can be sure is we've been very clear about what our mission is, and we're very, very focused on our mission, right? We're building a platform that is relevant and is very committed to the African economy. And when you look at it from multiple perspectives, we have a deep understanding of the consumer, what the consumer characteristics are, the kinds of products they want, the services they want included there. We have an ecosystem that is relevant to the market. We have marketplace, we have payments, we have logistics. So we're really building a platform that is fit for purpose and customized for the African consumer and for the seller. So there's a whole lot in terms of what we've built into our system, how we design our logistics network. I'm sure you're aware that now we've opened up our logistics to third-party players as well. And when you see the adoption rate, if I look at Jumia Pay, for example, look at our total payment volume, you see that growing year on year. Between 2019 to 2020, we were at 15.6% of GMV coming from Jumia Pay in terms of penetration. We're now at 25.7%. So the adoption is there. And that tells us that a lot of the things we're doing and the decisions we're making are relevant to the consumer. And we will keep building on that. We'll keep building more and more, innovating, depending on environment. Different countries have different characteristics, just to make sure that we're relevant to the consumer. For us, that's all we focus on. The opportunity is vast. The opportunity, we are talking about a market with 1.3 billion consumers, and any competition that helps in terms of increasing the adoption rate for e-commerce is good for Africa, and it's quite welcome.
Quite an interesting discussion, but we do have to leave it there. We have run out of time. But thank you so much, Madam Anama, for joining us on the show today. That, of course, is Juliet Anama. She's the chairwoman at Jumia Nigeria. Well, let's move on now. In the spirit of going green, Spain has introduced an autopilot electricity passenger bus in the coastal city of Malaga. Operated by the Avanza bus company, the zero-emission bus can be operated on manual mode or an autopilot and is able to transport up to 70 passengers. Now, the pilot project, supported by Malaga City Hall, will be in operation until March 13th, and users will be able to ride for free with an advanced booking. Local residents were delighted of the city's new attraction, as organizers of the project will take surveys to determine a customer satisfaction with the use of these new technologies.
For this first step, I think it is very good because, as you can see right now, I'm not touching anything and it is driving. We are practically going straight, but for example, here comes a curve, but it's very good. Then, if we get this bus inside real traffic with other vehicles and travelers, I think it would have to be perfected, but evidently it is a starting point. This is the future.
I think it will be viable if we as pedestrian and car drivers follow rules properly. If not, I think it will be complicated mainly because of bike drivers, people that don't respect crosswalks.
We saw it on Facebook and my husband said, we should go and ride it. And I said, let's go and ride it then. We did the reservation and here we are.
Now, we all know how important it is to have a support system in the hospital when recovering from a serious illness. With visitors restricted at some ICUs due to the pandemic control measures, a hospital in southwest China has developed a groundbreaking 5G plus VR system that enhances the virtual experience. Here's CGTN's Tao Yuan reporting.
60-year-old Kang Jian visits his son in the ICU of West China Hospital, virtually through a 5G plus VR system. His son's legs are seriously injured in a car accident.
I can just turn my head to wherever I want to look. If I turn around this way, I get to see his leg. It's as if I was there.
Since last year's COVID-19 outbreak, hospitals have placed restrictions on visitors for epidemic control purposes. But doctors believe that family support is essential to patient recovery, so they turn to technology for a solution.
VR technology is now very mature, and 5G technology is very fast. There's no delay. So I thought we could use these technologies for ICU visits.
Hu Chenggong is an associate professor at West China Hospital's critical care department. He worked with a tech company in southern China to develop the technology.
The navigation system installed in the robot can remember its path, so it walks automatically. The videos captured by each of these cameras offer an immersive experience.
Unlike traditional video chatting, the VR technology provides a 360-degree panoramic view.
For people who don't know about intensive care, the ICU can be a very scary place. The patients are all on the verge of death. The machines can be intimidating for the patients. Through this kind of technology, we hope patients can feel as though their family members are with them and give them confidence to fight the disease.
Hu Chenggong now wants to expand the use of this technology. As the best hospital in southwest China, West China Hospital works with many small medical facilities in the region.
They might be very remote and lack good medical resources and experienced doctors, but we can realize telemedicine through this kind of technology. It's as though I was standing right there.
Hu Chenggong says if that comes true, many more lives will have another chance. Taoyuan CGTN, Chengdu.
Now, a painting of a Paris street scene by Vincent van Gogh will be shown to the public for the first time. This is after spending more than a century behind closed doors in the private collection of a French family. The painting is part of a series that Van Gogh produced of scenes in Montmartre, a hilly district of Paris, now dominated by the Sacré-Cœur Church. It will be put on display by Sotheby's auction house in Amsterdam, Hong Kong and Paris prior to being auctioned off next month. Now, the auction house put an estimated value on the artwork at between $6.08 million and $9.72 million.
The painting a true rediscovery, meaning that although it has been published in comprehensive catalogues, it has never reappeared on the market since the date was acquired by the family who owns it. So it has been more than a century that this painting has been in private hands.
Nor a neo-impressionist touch with the little points of paint. You see that he introduces bright colors using very pure pigments. One of the reasons the colors are so well preserved in this work is the quality of the pigments that Van Gogh used, that I think his brother Theo bought for him. There's a beautiful story between Vincent and Theo, so this painting also is very moving and as a testimony to their relationship when they lived together. There's so many things you can see in it.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices extending gains for a fourth session to reach their highest levels in more than 13 months. Now, analysts say they are seeing some staying power in the recent oil price rally on a weaker than expected supply response by U.S. oil operators to those higher prices. Also, markets are still noting that sharp drop in U.S. crude output last week, due, of course, to that icy storm in Texas. Meanwhile, gold prices falling over 1% today as U.S. Treasury yields remained elevated. Gold's safe haven appeal was also hit by bets for a faster global economic recovery. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. A hotel in South Africa bets on robot concierge as the coronavirus forces new ways of doing things.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent. to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now in South Africa, staff at Hotel Sky in Johannesburg's wealthy Sandton district adhere to strict COVID-19 protocols, including wearing their masks and physical distancing. That is except for Lexi, Micah and Ariel. These three concierges don't follow the same rules, and that's because they're robots. Here's Angelo Coppola with their story.
The hotel, which launched last year, is the first in Africa to use automated attendance. It's also one of the only few hotels that have begun operating in the middle of a pandemic.
It's a daunting task, opening up a new property, and especially during a COVID period. So it's been a tough challenge, but we're here to disrupt the hotel market. So here we are.
The hotel is unusual because guests get to meet artificial intelligence face to face as they enter reception. The three robots do everything that a concierge would do and more.
We gave them three personalities, Lexi, Ariel and Mika. We gave them the little Sandton fashionista personalities, and the idea with that is the concierge function. You know, ask them, get your feedback, do the room service deliveries, and all of the functions. Rate your stay, get the feedback, but also, you know, create a little bit of excitement in South Africa and obviously in the travel trade.
In a country with 32.5% unemployment levels, some are concerned that robots could take humans' jobs away.
Never, never. Now, keeping in mind we're in hospitality, you could never replace the human factor. The hero in our story will always be the guest, and the guest comes first. The robots, however, is adding a little feature and making the function of the staff so much more exciting.
The tech in this hotel doesn't end with the three robots. There are self-checking kiosks. There's an app with anything from checking in to room service delivery.
So it's all about the tech and making the guest experience so much better for our guests. So yeah, exciting times.
There have been questions about whether robots are going to take the place of human beings. That's not the case in the hospitality sector, but my job might be in jeopardy.
This is Angelo Coppola from CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, before we leave you on that note, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand giving back all of its gains that were made after the government released its annual budget on Wednesday, which of course assured some investors that the country could avoid a full fiscal crisis. We saw the currency falling 1.3% against the dollar, with credit ratings agency Fitch saying the country still faced severe challenges to implementing fiscal consolidation. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.